Hi students, welcome to Unit 3 and Mod 3. I am very excited about introducing this unit and this topic. I'm really psyched about it. I think you guys are going to really enjoy it. We have some great texts and a great new writing assignment, and we've got some slight differences here between this unit and the previous two units. We're doing a bit of a pivot and a little bit of a change in terms of the kind of text that you're going to be focused on reading, and also in terms of the actual formal writing assignment. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So this is the beginning of our unit. We're on the first page, unit overview and instructions. And as you guys know, I like to give a good overview and introduction to the unit. I think the pre-thinking and the pre-reading and the pre-work really makes a big difference in terms of comprehension and connections that we make when we're actually reading our texts. All right, so here's our overview. Module 3, responding to a text. So that's basically writing a reflection. And we are focused on reflective and critical thinking and responding to and engaging with our texts. You are not going to be writing a literary analysis. I know that's what you did in Unit 1 and Unit 2, but we're pivoting a bit here. You're technically going to be writing a formal reflection. It will still have a required format and organization, and very similar organization in terms of intro, body, conclusion. But again, it's not a literary analysis, it's a formal reflection. So you'll have an opportunity in the reflective essay to actually express your personal reaction and personal response to the text. And yes, you'll be able to use first person sparingly in your reflective essay. But our focus essentially is responding to the text. The genre that we are looking at is actually rhetoric and notable speeches. So again, in Unit 1 and Unit 2, we looked at drama, we looked at plays. First a Greek tragedy, and then an early 20th century short play, Trifles by Susan Glasbells. Now we're moving a little farther along on the timeline. This is the end of the 20th century. Our first speech, I believe, is 1999, the late 1990s. And our second speech is early 21st century. So very much of our time and our era, okay? Again, the first speech was roughly about 21, 22 years ago. Our second speech, I believe, in the past 5 years. I don't remember the exact date off the top of my head, but I would say early to mid 2010s, probably 2014, 2015. So very recent and very current. There are our time periods, our themes. So our themes are actually the one thing that has changed the least. Even though we're pivoting in terms of genre and we're pivoting in terms of the kind of essay you're going to be writing, our themes are relatively the same here. And those are justice, equality, leadership, fairness, and civil disobedience. So we're expanding a little bit here. You're going to notice in these speeches, of course, you're going to immediately notice it's very different from a drama, a play. It's not fiction. It's a written speech that was delivered and performed. It is, part personal narrative and creative, I'm going to say creative nonfiction, loosely, okay? So we're also going from fiction to nonfiction. And these speeches, these texts, are really dealing in a lot of the same big ideas in terms of justice, equality, and leadership. But I would say that they also expand a bit on that. And that while we did look at individual rights, right, very individual and personal rights in Antigone and Trifles, these speeches look at human rights. So again, individual rights, human rights, obviously they are basically the same, but they're not, right? I mean, there's individual and then there's human rights. So, it's an expansion. And what I want you to see here is that we're really building upon the same course themes. Your skills for this unit that we'll be really focusing on responding to a text, that is connecting with the text on a personal level and engaging with that text. So you're connecting with it, you're really engaging with it. How was the text written? How was it delivered? What kinds of language, imagery, repetition does the speech or the text use? How about when it's delivered? How is rhetoric, right? How is the art of persuasive and effective communication really harnessed and utilized by our authors to share their message? So you're looking at the how and the composition of the text, but you're also just sort of responding and reacting to the text on a personal level. These speeches are very much written and designed to elicit a personal response. So they really call out for a personal response. We are focused on reflective and critical thinking. We are also once again looking at having strong, clear, assertive, and focused topic sentences for each subtopic in our essay. Okay, the short informal assignments or the homework. We have a couple of short reflections, just a paragraph or two. We again have a discussion board. I think you guys have gotten used to that by now, that we have a discussion board every week. And then you're going to be submitting some pre-writing before you actually submit the final copy of the essay. Our formal assignment, that is really the culmination of the unit and the module, is a formal reflection. So what I want to stress here is that you've been writing reflections and doing some reflective and critical thinking the entire semester for me. You've been, composing short reflections in both previous units. So this is similar, not exactly the same, but very similar, and think of this as a longer formal reflection, okay? It needs to be around 1,000 words. So here are the instructions for basically tackling this unit and module. And this is going to look very familiar to the previous two units. Work through the first half of the content before you actually jump into the speeches. Do the pre-work, okay? Do the pre-reading work. It really does help. So watch the intro video. That's this video, of course. Read the overview and instructions. Look at the documents I've provided, especially anything relating to sort of context for the speeches. Make sure that you pay close attention to the context and the biographies of our authors. That really helps prepare you before you jump into the speeches. And then take like 15 minutes to do the pre-reading reflection. It's of course informal. I think it's worth 5 or 10 points, but all of this really, again, helps to prepare you before you jump right into these speeches, okay? Then, after you've, of course, read the text, done the reading, you're going to come back to the module and do your post-reading reflection, a discussion board. You're going to start doing your pre-writing for your formal reflection, your reflective essay. And then, as always, you have an option of submitting a draft to me next week to get some feedback. I'm also going to be available for one-on-one student conferences. And there's a proofreading checklist for proofreading your reflective essay. And then, of course, finally submitting the final copy. So that takes you all the way through sort of the table of contents for this unit. And what you might notice is that I'm trying to keep it very consistent for you guys so that you kind of know what to expect each week. All right, so I want to share a few thoughts before you begin this module. And I'm going to try and keep these brief, but I think they're important. So do pay close attention to these thoughts. If you need to pause the video and read through the bullet points, that's absolutely fine. First, I want to stress that while we're making some slight pivots in our genre, from dramas to written speeches, and we're pivoting a bit in time period from early 20th century to the 21st century, our course themes are still present, right? Justice, leadership, and equality, but we're expanding, we're building here, okay? We're still looking at justice, equality, the law, and fairness, leadership, And I think a little bit of an expansion here, human rights and civil disobedience, okay? Not exactly what we've been talking about, but definitely closely related. These texts that you're going to be looking at and studying and reading and discussing in Unit 3, they're technically speeches, and you're going to look at the written speech, and then you're going to see the speech delivered or performed by the author, okay? They are very relevant to our course themes and topics, but they're also very relevant to our times. So let me just explain a little bit. I, of course, had a choice in assigning the literature or the text for this unit for this week. And I could have chosen a novel, which is actually frequently what's done in a 15-week semester. You read a novel in a week, you do some discussion and pre-writing a second week, and then you write your paper and submit it, usually in a 3-week time period. And I could have done a novel. There are a lot of great novels out there. But I felt like really do a good job reading a novel and thinking about it and discussing it and writing about it in 1 week, while I could do that, I did not want to do that to you guys, okay? Yes, I could have done more drama. I could have also done poetry or a short story. I could have done, some fiction or some poetry. There were some choices, but ultimately I felt like the written speeches were not just more manageable and more accessible, because obviously poetry, while I love it, is it's very dense, it's very metaphorical, a lot of figurative language, and people tend to either love or hate it, okay? So people tend to have some very visceral responses. I felt like the speeches were just more accessible and more manageable for the time frame we have to work in, but also they are incredibly relevant to the times we're living in. And I think it's important to not only read Shakespeare and wonderful literature and Greek tragedies, but also to have a little bit to experience some of the different kinds of texts out there, right? I mean, there are all kinds of texts, even pictures, videos, these are all text, speeches, okay? To look at written communication in a slightly different format, and genre. And so I think that these speeches will be very interesting and very engaging and very relevant and very manageable in the time that we have. And again, I think they also expand on the course themes that we've already been discussing, okay? Except we're going kind of from individual rights to human rights. So also, please keep in mind that the topics of these texts are complex ones. They're not sort of really easy topics, okay? There's a lot of detail and nuance to them, and we want to try to avoid overgeneralizations and oversimplifications. Now, sometimes I do that to introduce material, but after you've done the reading, we'll dig into the detail and the nuance. But just know in advance, they are some complex and kind of tough topics. They could be a little bit surprising or uncomfortable in that these speeches deal with not creative fiction, but again, reality, real things that have happened, including mass violence, mass atrocities, war, and violence. So these speeches are addressing real issues in the real world today, the 20th and also the 21st century. Now, they're not graphic. I don't want to give you the wrong impression by any means. There are no graphic images, but again, the topics are kind of heavy, okay? Heavy topics, for lack of a better term. And so do keep that in mind. Before you jump right into them. I want people to kind of have a feeling of what to expect. And then finally, your job, as always, will be to examine the text closely in terms of their ideas and themes. We've been talking about the big ideas and the themes since the beginning of the semester. So while it's a different genre, and it's more current, more contemporary, and it's not fiction, it's nonfiction. Hey, we're still dealing in very similar big ideas and themes. These speeches do have themes to them, okay? Additionally, consider how the texts are composed and consider how the authors share their message. So in addition to a continuation of discussing these big ideas about justice and equality and leadership, we want to take a look at how the authors of these speeches use rhetoric. Rhetoric can be very loosely defined as effective communication or the art of persuasive communication. And the authors of these speeches are definitely writing and delivering these speeches in order to persuade. They have a message, they have a theme that they want to share with their audience, okay? And they are definitely writing to persuade. So we're going to take a look at how they've constructed these speeches. For example, the imagery, the stories, the references maybe to other cultural events or history or authors, and the language, like the words, the phrases, any use of repetition. So that's what I mean by how they use rhetoric and how these speeches are composed. Now, you might agree or disagree with some or all of the texts, and this is fine. You are expected to make meaning from these texts and have your own personal reactions and responses, but explain your personal reactions clearly and, of course, respectfully. So, I don't ever expect students to necessarily just sort of fall in love with everything that we read and love it and agree with it and think it's just the best thing. I mean, some things you're going to like, some things you may not like, and you might agree with parts of a text and disagree with other parts of it. And I just want to stress that, we are looking at these texts for how they were composed, and then you're being asked to engage with them and respond to them. And so your authentic and honest response and reaction is definitely expected. There's no right or wrong response. There's no right or wrong reaction. It's your personal response to the text, okay? But I do want to say that you're never expected to love everything or agree with it wholly, although I think that you guys will really enjoy this unit, and I'm very excited about it, and I think you will really enjoy these texts and enjoy them for, if nothing else, appreciate how well written and delivered they are. So certainly we can agree or disagree with something and still appreciate it for its qualities and its merits and its sort of its art. In this unit, we are examining notable speeches and rhetoric, as I've said, that have impacted society. So I'm not going to call these speeches the greatest speeches ever or, like the top 10 speeches. Some people do that, and I don't like to be that presumptuous and say this is like the best speech ever. But these speeches are well regarded by people in all disciplines and all backgrounds. They are well regarded, well respected, and notable for how they did manage to successfully persuade and impact society. So people really paid attention to these speeches and are still talking about them today. So again, whether you agree or disagree, or regardless of your personal response or reaction, they are widely regarded as successful pieces of rhetoric and communication. In what is widely considered, sorry, I think I skipped a bullet there. I apologize, guys. So in this unit, we're examining notable speeches. I mentioned that. We're also looking at how did the authors use rhetoric to successfully share their message. So how did they successfully communicate that message? And what can we learn from these examples of powerful and moving rhetoric? So again, we're going to look at the message, but more importantly than whether we necessarily agree or disagree with the message is, how did the authors communicate their message, right? What kind of language, imagery, stories did they use to share these messages and to connect with their audience, all right? And so what can we learn from these examples of rhetoric in terms of persuasive communication and effective communication? And so I've been talking for the past 15 minutes, right, about these texts and these speeches. So now I'm going to reveal to you the two speeches that you're going to be looking at. These are, by the way, widely considered important, or let's say notable speeches or successful examples of rhetoric. The first one is The Perils of Indifference by Elie Wiesel, which was delivered at the White House as a guest of the President of the United States, President Bill Clinton. And this was in the late 1990s, before the new millennium. And so Elie Wiesel delivered this speech for quite a large audience, right? Not just the President of the United States and members of Congress and legislators and journalists and reporters, but anytime you deliver at as a guest of the President of the United States, that generally goes global. So this is a worldwide audience. And the title of the address, again, is The Perils of Indifference. So this speech is extraordinary, and as you might have sort of already gathered from the title, about the dangers of being indifferent to other people's struggles, the lack of response, if you will, to human plights and human struggles. Some of you might be familiar with Elie Wiesel. He is a very famous Holocaust survivor and human rights advocate. He recently died in 2016, but he is widely known around the globe. And he has gone from being really just identified with the Holocaust, but more widely as a human rights advocate for people around the world. Our second speech is by Malala Yousafzai on her 16th birthday. She delivers a powerful address to the United Nations about the impact of wars and violence on children around the world, especially in her part of the world, she comes from Afghanistan, and especially the impact on girls and the importance of education for all children. So Malala is just another amazing sort of human rights advocate, and she was actually an activist at the age of 12, okay? At the age of 12, just think about that for a moment. She started blogging for the BBC at 12, and she is the youngest recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, and she also spoke to a global audience at the United Nations, the UN, on her 16th birthday. So these two individuals, Elie Wiesel and Malala Yousafzai, are widely respected and regarded for their human rights work and advocacy and their activism, and have amazing stories in and of themselves. So while they're from different cultures and faiths and backgrounds and even of different generations, you will notice that there are certainly some striking differences between Wiesel and Malala. They actually share many things. Both Wiesel and Malala are survivors who, by all accounts, should not have survived to tell their story. So both of these individuals have harrowing stories, which they could have easily sort of died and perished from. And I'll let you dig into the biographies that go into detail about their stories and their backgrounds. But that's something that both Malala and Wiesel share in common. They are survivors. They have a survivor story. And that's definitely part of their speeches when they're sharing their message, is that it starts with their story. Okay, both are human rights both are human rights advocates and take clear, strong stands, moral stands even, on human rights, while also demanding action from world leadership. So you'll notice that they are not wishy-washy. They are not neutral. They take strong stands, and they call for action from leadership. In reflecting on these two speeches, when you're done reading them and watching them being delivered, ask yourself, what else might Wiesel and Malala have in common, right? How about the texts? How about the speeches? What do they share, right? I want you to think about these texts individually, respond to them, right? You need to engage with both of them on their own, but also think about them against each other, sort of in a compare and contrast. there are some easy and obvious differences, right, in terms of generational differences and backgrounds between the authors and the specific kinds of struggles they're talking about. But more broadly, these two sort of seemingly disparate speeches and individuals actually share quite a bit. They have quite a bit in common. And maybe you agree or disagree with that, but I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on the topic. So we're at 25 minutes. I'm actually going to wrap up this video. I think by now in our third unit, you guys are in a good rhythm now and you kind of know what to expect in these modules, right? Make sure that you take the time to read the biographies, watch the biographies, think about it. Read the assignment sheet with the outline, do the pre-reading reflection, and of course, as always, start in the beginning and work your way through in sequential order. The modules are set up in steps, as you know, and they're set up in sequential order from pre-reading to reading to post-reading reflection, discussion board, pre-writing, etc. So you're going to see that this module and unit is very similar to the previous two. And, I wish you the best of luck and happy reading. And I'm really very excited about this unit. I hope you guys really enjoy it and you get a lot out of it. I think it's a great unit. And I'm really looking forward to hearing just your ideas and thoughts on the discussion boards. All right, guys, until next time, take care, be well, and feel free to email me if you have any questions or concerns about anything related to our new unit, the text, the speeches, the topics, or the writing assignment. Bye-bye.